All right, thank you for listening to another episode of Remake Rewind, the podcast where each side of remakes or reboots should have happened. I'm Mike, as always. With me, I've got my good buddy Alex. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing so great. Actually, things are really good. The last couple of weeks have been a little interesting. We basically missed an episode because your household had COVID, and then as soon as you started to get better, you asked, hey, can we delay a little bit? I'm not quite, if you really want to record, we'll record, but I'm still recovering. And then as soon as you and Scarlett started recovering, Katrina got COVID pretty bad. And then I had a business trip. So it's been a pretty hectic month for both of our households. So
yeah. And it's funny because you and I saw each other the night that I started getting symptoms, but I don't think that I gave it to you.
No, there's no way you gave it to me. I never got it. I was testing positive from the moment, or I was testing, every other day from the time that you told me you tested positive, because you tested positive the day after we hung out. And I never got it, and then Katrina got it, and so same thing. Luckily we have a 2-bedroom, so I was able to stay away because I had a business trip last week, and I have a huge trip coming up in about a week and a half. So it's like I could not get it. Like this month, I cannot get it. It's a big month. Like I'm going to Barcelona and Nice in just a couple of weeks. I'm like I cannot miss that trip for work. So I was like, fuck, I cannot get it. And somehow, I missed it. And amazingly, when I had COVID last year, Katrina, who, she's immunocompromised, somehow she didn't get it. It was lucky. So both times that somebody in our household had COVID, the other person didn't get it. So we got really lucky.
Yeah. Cool. So yeah, I'm good too. Thanks for asking.
Yeah.
Everything's good.
I'm glad you and Scarlett are feeling better because you were testing positive for a pretty long time.
It was like just over a week.
Yeah, a little.
And she was a few days behind me, and she was just a little bit over a week too. So it wasn't crazy, but
that's good.
She's had like a lingering cough though, which is not
poor Scarlett.
Yeah, not super fun.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Apparently, it's a thing that can happen, and the expectation is like a week and a half, and she's got medication for it, so it should be okay.
Yeah, good.
Yeah,
I was very excited about this episode to do when I heard. So we're going to be covering Matilda. Matilda is obviously. I'm a few years younger than you, so Matilda was a bigger part of my childhood than probably yours, but I'm sure you saw the 1996 version.
Yeah, I was 11 when it came out, so I feel like I was still kind of, maybe I was a little bit old, but I was in there. I grew up on Roald Dahl stuff too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was 96, so I was like 8, so I was definitely the right age for that. And like this was a movie that every time it was on TV, this isn't something that was on TV, all the time, but when it was on, we would watch it. We covered this on Ruin My Childhood a couple years ago, and I've watched it since we covered it on Ruin My Childhood, and now so this is a movie that I'm very fond of, and we were going to do Matilda in December when it came out, but we decided to take a little. You got COVID, and so we decided to push it a couple of weeks because this came out on Netflix in December, so we're about 3 weeks late for this movie coming out. But I was really excited because this Matilda musical obviously was a big TikTok, Instagram kind of trend for a little bit, and then Wednesday just knocked it out of the park with its little dance. But this had a really viral TikTok, Instagram advertisement of like the kids fucking going hard dancing in the hall. So I was really excited.
I did not see that.
Oh, it was big. It was a lot. I sent you the ad. It was like, damn, that new Matilda goes hard.
Yeah, I saw the ad and I was like, oh, that's interesting.
And so it was a lot of people were recreating it for a couple of days because it came out in the UK in November, and then it dropped in the US in December. But then Wednesday came out, and still, obviously everybody is doing the like that's not the right song, but the Wednesday dance.
Yeah.
So this one, like a few people were doing it, and then Wednesday came out, and everyone just completely forgot about this. But I was really excited because I was like, "Holy shit, this looks insane!" This musical version. So I was really excited to cover this. So I'm glad that we're finally getting to it. But I've definitely got opinions and things to say.
I was excited. I was excited.
I think the way you said that, I think I feel the same way. I'm gonna have a guess, but we'll talk about it.
Yeah. Yes, we will.
We'll get to it. Do you want to summarize the first movie or the second one?
I'll do the second one.
All right. So Matilda, classic Roald Dahl story about a genius girl who, she gets picked on by her family. She gets picked on by authorities at school. But then she figures out that she's like a little baby Carrie, and she can move things with her minds. And she in a much more family-friendly way, enacts her revenge on both her family and the evil principal, headmistress, Mrs. Trunchbull, and finds happiness with her teacher, Miss Honey.
It's like a wholesome Stephen King story.
It is. So I'm just going to say this before we talk about it, and I want you to, I think maybe we can do something a little different at the end of this version. But when I was watching it this time, and something I noticed this time around that I never really noticed in previous watches was, in this version, I would like to see a trailer for this movie at least. Recutting this movie and make a trailer where it's almost like a Talented Mr. Ripley style, like suspense thriller, where the whole plot of the movie is Matilda manipulating everybody to get adopted by Miss Honey, who's actually rich. Because by the end of the movie, Matilda goes from being both like she's being neglected in all aspects of her life to basically being adopted by a multimillionaire by the end of the movie who has a huge property, nice house, and everything. It's like, you could, with clever editing, you could edit this to be like a weird suspense thriller kind of movie. I'd like to see somebody do it.
Yeah, maybe I should do that.
Yeah. And we'll talk about it.
Those do well for people.
Yeah.
That could be my ticket to stardom.
Yeah, there you go.
Re-editing Matilda. That guy did The Shining as a romantic comedy, right?
Yeah. Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
I remember that a few years back.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah.
I was going to say, just continuing my thought from before you did the synopsis, I lost my train of thought for the framing of this, but I think that this movie appeals. Oh, we were talking about how old I was. So, I was 11. I was a little bit too old for this. But I think that the way that this story is told, the way that, Danny DeVito envisioned it. Danny DeVito directed this, by the way. Super cool.
Yeah, he did.
I think it appeals to a slightly older crowd. It feels a lot like a Tim Burton movie. And
it definitely does.
Yeah, and like Tim Burton...
it had Pee Wee Herman in it.
Yeah, exactly. Paul Rubens. And that's sort of the demographic for these types of movies. Feels like it's, it feels like a family movie. Like you can watch it with your 6-year-old, but the parents will enjoy it too.
Absolutely.
And, we'll get to it when we get to it, but the new one doesn't quite feel like that.
No, it doesn't. I've gotten a lot to talk about with the new one. With this original one, there's something about, I'm just going to say, this is one thing I'm going to say about the beginning, this movie and the new one, and I'm going to try to not talk about the new one as much going forward. But one of the things that I really appreciate, and you and I have talked about it when we've covered, other movies that have like miniatures and puppeteers and whatnot, but there's something about having things on the screen, in camera, and when she's doing all of her little telekinesis stuff, for the most part, except for when they're like throwing kids and kids are flying around, that's obviously got some animation stuff going on. But when she's like moving the chalk around and moving the things around in her bedroom, for the most part, that's things on wires and on blue, green screen maybe, but things are moving around. Like, it's practical for the most part. I remember watching the new version being like, when the fuck is she going to get her superpowers? And even this version, she gets her powers later in the movie than I remember her getting them.
Yeah.
But in the new version, the first time you really see her do it and like really control it, she does this thing with her hat and flies around. And it was such an obvious CGI hat. And I was like, I understand that it's quicker and easier to do that, but it was very obvious it was a CGI hat. And even though like it's very obvious these things are on wires or on arms that are moving around, there's something about seeing a physical object moving around a room.
Yeah, it's charming.
That even though it was hokey, there's charming, like it just feels more real because obviously there's a real thing. And it was a little hokey, but I would take the hokiness of this one over the CGI telekinesis of the new one any day.
Yeah, and I think stuff like that gives you a little bit of leeway with an audience for something that you do need to use CGI for. There's a couple CG shots in the original one, and one of them is when she has the poker chips and everything spinning around in the living room, and that's like, it's very clearly CG, and it doesn't look fantastic, but it's fine. And I think when you're in the moment of in that moment watching that movie, you're like, all right, well, that doesn't bother me. Keep on trucking, because you built up goodwill from all the practical effects.
But when you, that scene that you mentioned with the poker chips flying around, there's other stuff that was done practically in the same shot.
Right.
So your eyes are more focused on her. Why?
Matilda.
Why can't I think of it? Matilda. I was going to say the actor's name,
Martin
but
Wilson.
I couldn't remember. Thank you.
Who's awesome.
You see Mara Wilson, Matilda, and you see some of the other stuff. So your eyes are looking at her and the other stuff that are closer. Right. And so the ships being CGI in the background, it's more of a flourish versus what you're supposed to be looking at.
Yeah. And if you haven't watched the movie recently, we're talking about like lamps in the foreground and stuff that are just kind of shaking.
Yeah, but like your eye is drawn to that because they're at the front of the frame. Yeah. You're also looking at her, and there's some other smaller stuff that are moving around. Like the stuff that's at the front of the frame is real, and the stuff in the background is the CGI. So your eye doesn't immediately go to that, and that's what CGI should be used for. Is it should be a tool to, embellish things and do things that you really can't do. And I do think we've talked about it a lot in previous episodes, but like we did get to a point, especially in like the mid 2000s, where we CGI'd everything just because we could, even if we didn't need to.
Yeah, the most effective uses of CG that get talked about when you're talking about this kind of stuff do that. They blend practical elements with CG. I'm talking about like the Wolf of Wall Street, which most people don't even notice. Jurassic Park. Christopher Nolan does it
very well. Yeah.
Let's talk about the actual story.
Yeah, let's do it.
This is such a nice story.
It is really a nice story. You've got Mara Wilson, who is just delightful, and there was just a brief period in the early to mid 90s where you had between Miracle on 34th Street, this and Miss Doubtfire, where Mara Wilson was just this like beacon of just hope and cuteness and just warmth of kid and family friendly movies. And it's interesting because they had like another actress. Obviously there was a baby version, and then there was one that was supposed to be the 4-year-old version, and she's the 6.5-year-old version. I almost feel like you didn't need that other introductory kid in the middle. I think Mara just could have done the whole thing, and I would have been fine with it.
Yeah,
but she's great.
Yeah, she's great, and I really appreciate how well Danny DeVito is able to balance the sweetness with like the meanness of this movie, because there's so many over the top mean elements that don't feel over the top, but like Trunchbull and her parents are so fucking mean. And I feel like in another movie, Matilda and Miss Honey would be like saccharine. They'd be too sweet. And there's a lot of balancing going on in this movie, and it totally works. I'm really impressed with Danny DeVito.
What I think is even more interesting about that whole thing is like this movie was made at a very difficult time during Mara Wilson's life. Her mom passed away before the movie was done being filmed, and her mom was going through very aggressive cancer treatments. Her dad was having to work still. So Danny DeVito and Rhea Perlman, his wife, they actually took in Mara Wilson for a lot of periods during the filming of this movie because the dad was working. So they actually let her stay and would play with her and everything. So they actually had a very sweet family dynamic for this movie. And then Mara wanted to make sure that this movie got done. It was dedicated to her mom. So this was like a really difficult movie to be done at this period, and to have that like that darkness that you mentioned as well as the sweetness. It's pretty amazing that they walked the line that they did.
Yeah, the sincerity comes through.
Yeah.
That like sweet family dynamic.
It's what's interesting, and I'm not the first person to bring this up or ask about it. But there's a lot of parallels to the Harry Potter series, the Dursleys and the Wormwoods. And one of the things that people always ask, like, which is worse, the Dursleys or the Wormwoods? And Dursleys get an asterisk because they were around a Horcrux the whole time. But ultimately, what I love about this movie, I think the ending of this movie, and everybody's seen this, so I don't care about spoiling it. And if you haven't, this movie's
30-year-old movie. Sorry.
Yeah, figure it out. But the ending of this movie I love, because at the end, this is where I kind of talk about this being a little bit more of a suspense thriller, like she kind of manipulated things. Because at the end of the movie, the FBI is zeroing in on the family, and they show up like, we got to get out of here. The FBI's coming. And Matilda goes, hey, I've got the adoption paper. If you guys just sign it, I can fucking kick it with Miss Honey. So it's a little manipulative. Like they kind of put Miss Honey on the spot. Like, hey, do you want to adopt this kid that you've known for a couple of weeks?
Yeah.
And she does it, of course. But there's a point where Rhea Perlman, as the mom, is like, this is kind of fucked up. Like, I've been a terrible mom, so bad that my kid wants to be adopted by somebody else. But she also realizes it's the best thing for her.
Right.
And there's like a moment, like you can tell that the parent, both Danny DeVito and Rhea Perlman, realize, shit, we've been really bad, terrible parents, and we feel bad now, but we recognize that this is the right thing, and they selflessly let her go and be where she can flourish and thrive.
Right.
And it's a very sweet ending. It's a kind of a bittersweet ending, but I look at it as like they did the right thing for their kid.
Yeah.
That was the right move.
Yeah, I think the book and the movie says it's the first good thing that the parents have done for Matilda her whole life.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really sweet. I think another thing that works about this movie is that the parents like kind of love each other. They're like Morticia and Gomez if they were pieces of shit. And it's like it's charming, and the movie doesn't really have that.
No, you're right, because there's the scene when Miss Honey comes to talk to the parents, being like, your daughter's a genius. Like, I think we should try to get her an accelerated program. The principal's not listening, but I think you guys as parents should push for her to do that. And they're like, pfft. And like to your point, Rhea Perlman's like, look at you. You use your brain, and you've got nothing. You're by yourself. And look at me. I've got this nice house, and I've got this husband who provides. Like, they really do.
Yeah, they get along. They're always on the same page.
Yeah, they clearly get along really well. Yeah, it's interesting. It's like, and they get along very well with their son as well, Mike.
Little AJ Soprano.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Like, there's a family dynamic that works there. They just, for whatever reason, from the day Matilda was born, they just neglected her. Like, she learns how to write her name in spilled food as like a 1-year-old baby.
Yeah.
And she teaches, like, from like 4 years old on, they just forget about her and they just go and do their thing. And she's running a household at 4 years old.
I like that Danny DeVito is basically just doing Frank Reynolds, by the way.
Yeah, pretty much. You know what's funny? When like he bleaches, well, she puts the peroxide in his hair oil and it bleaches him. I actually thought he looked better with like the bleached hair.
Yeah. Seeing him and the dad with the green hair in the new one made me feel very self-conscious because I've looked like both of those guys.
Looked like both of those
within the last year.
You have. You've had the exact same hair color, just both of them.
I think I pulled it off better.
Yeah, the kids were great. You know, all the child actors were fantastic. From the pigtail girl getting thrown to Lavender with her newts, and I can't remember the kid who had to eat the cake.
Barry Bogwater.
Yeah,
fantastic names for everybody. Miss Honey, Crunch'em Hall, Trunchbull, Barry Bogwater. So good.
But like all the kids were really delightful in this movie and did a great job.
Yeah, none of them felt like they were stealing the show either.
Stevie from Malcolm in the Middle is like a background kid in this. So I was like, hey, it's Stevie. But no, it's like everything about this movie is, well acted. It's great.
John Lovitz also popped up doing like a little RoboCop thing.
Yeah, I'll buy that for $1, kind of that guy.
Yeah, exactly.
Sticky or whatever, the little weird sticky game show where you just get covered in glue.
The son was also wearing Napalm Death and Judas Priest shirts. That was cool.
Yeah. It's just an all-around solid movie. Like, I don't really know what to talk about with this one. I feel like everybody has seen it. But, like, it's just a really well-done, heartfelt movie that's still, to this day, very entertaining. Like, we covered on Ruin Our Childhood, and we're like, yeah, this is still a really fun, fantastic movie just to sit there and enjoy. Yeah. It's heartwarming.
Well, I could talk about it from a technical standpoint a little bit. There's some stuff I appreciated.
Let me get you that tech standpoint.
I just think it's a like cinematography is from a cinematographical standpoint, it's very elegantly crafted. And there's like very 90s things like the zoom ins or like the really quick dollies into people. It's like a recurring thing, but it works really well. And it feels very like Evil Dead-y almost, which is cool. It gives the movie some dynamic. And there's also these like very 90s fisheye lenses on Trunchbull, which I appreciate. It makes her look very like monstrous.
Yeah.
Also weirdly doesn't date it. I think it felt like there's a lot of camera work that felt very 60s, 70s, like very classic Hollywood filmmaking. I thought that was cool. I thought that did another thing that was impressive to me, which is that it didn't date the movie. It made it feel timeless.
I agree. There's something about this movie where it's almost like obviously Danny DeVito learned a lot from Tim Burton in the movies that they had, done prior to this.
And Danny DeVito has also been working on sets for,
forever,
30 years at that point.
Yeah, he had his sitcoms and all of his movies and stuff. But there is something like the Tim Burton Batman movies. It's like in this weird timeline where it's like, is it in the 30s? Is it modern
Right.
day?
That's
is it
exactly
slightly
what it is.
futuristic? It's like this movie feels like, with the exception of like cell phones not being present, like this feels like it could be set today if you didn't show the 90s tube TV. Like if they didn't show any of the technology that they did show, this could be today.
Yeah, because there's a very deliberate blending in the costume and the set choices of styles and trends from the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. And it's all like so bright and vibrant too. It doesn't tie it to any one period.
Well, and I think us watching it right now, like 90s is a bit like big comeback right now. Like 90s fashion is back. We're also
right.
in that
and like
period,
DeVito's not going to predict that, but that's definitely working in its favor. As
it's
well as
definitely working in its favor.
yeah, as well as like there's a reference to Bruce Springsteen at the end. I feel like Bruce Springsteen is still relevant, so
yeah, absolutely he is.
And also the Napalm Death and Judas Priest shirts, like the bands that people still talk about. It keeps it all feeling timeless.
Yeah, it is. And then like there's just certain things that are like the physical comedy in this that's always, there's something about simple physical humor, almost like what's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of it. But it's just like the type of comedy that's in this movie is timeless. There's no
slapstick
real references. Like all those references that you mentioned are over decades. So there's nothing that pinpoints this and locks us into a specific time zone. But then there's also the like the type of humor, like the pratfall kind of humor, right?
Slapstick.
I don't remember what that's slapstick. The slapstick humor in this is good, but not over the top.
Right.
Like when they're throwing the pigtail girl around, they do just enough spins where it's like, that's excessive, but it's funny. Yeah. And the way she flies around is just silly and over the top. She punts a black cat. It's just like little things like that. It's just a little over the top.
Yeah, it's a fairy tale. It's a modern fairy tale. And there's, I feel like a good fairy tale, you don't ever think that you're really rooted in reality, but you also feel for the characters as if they were real people.
Yeah. One of my notes, I got it right here, as I put, they do a B&E because Miss Honey and and Matilda break into her
just doing
their her old house that Trunchbull stole, and then at the end I wrote, does another B&E, moves the dad's portrait to scare Trump. So Matilda goes back by herself, breaks into the house again, and just fucks with Trunchbull using her powers to make it look like the house is haunted by the dad. And it's just really well done. I don't really have anything else to say. It's a fun movie. It's a timeless classic.
Yeah, I agree. How much money is the mom losing at bingo, by the way?
Who knows?
Like, all she does apparently is go play bingo during the
Every
day while
day.
the dad's at work.
And get like mani-pedis.
Yeah, and like, I don't know if bingo is like a casino, but I have to assume that the house is winning most of the time.
Yeah, so the way bingo works, because that's obviously a thing that senior citizens do. Like, I think it's a thing that you go and you buy the boards when you walk in, and you reuse the boards the whole time. So it's like,
but nobody's like gaming bingo the way that card counters do at the casino.
No, because typically the way bingo works is it's something super simple that anybody can do. So normally it's just they make their money on volume. Because it's like, you'll go to a bingo hall and there might be 100 people playing, and they might pay $1 per game.
Mike, I know how bingo works. I'm just saying.
So I don't think it's that expensive. Like, I think if we were going, like, you could go and probably do bingo for $10 a week and still
all right.
play a bunch of games. I don't think it's that pricey.
All right. The dad is just like so concerned with making money and being like a 50s patriarch, know.
Well, what's funny about that is they also they don't send Matilda to school until she's 6.5 because he actively doesn't want her to go to school because he's getting all these like stolen car parts shipped to his house because he's convinced the cops are watching. And she's like, the cops are here. Like, oh, no, those are speedboat salespeople. She's like, they're definitely cops.
Yeah.
So he doesn't want her to go to school because he doesn't want packages piling up. He wants her to be there to like sign for packages. So they just like neglect her education so that way they can have her there managing the stolen packages. It's so funny.
It's good stuff. I like to think that this movie is kind of a prequel to Always Sunny.
It totally could be.
Dennis and Deandra feel like the children of these people.
Yeah, it's like Sweet Dee got sent somewhere because of her scoliosis, and that's little Mike is Dennis.
Yeah, even though he looks like AJ Soprano.
Is it AJ Soprano? Is it the same kid?
No, I looked it up. It's not, but it's close. When The Sopranos starts, like 6 years, or no, I guess 4
It's
years later.
2000, 2001.
I think it's 99 actually, so maybe 3 years later. But AJ is like the same age as this kid.
Got it.
So it's a little off. Same kid though. I'm both in Jersey.
99. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. I know my Sopranos, buddy. Did you know that DeVito and Bruce Springsteen are like good friends, and DeVito is also from Asbury Park, and that's why they did the little Bruce reference?
Oh, no, I did not know that. That's cool.
Now you do.
It's cool. All right, man. What have you been up to, bud?
Should we wrap that up? Good movie,
Yeah, it's
recommended.
I think we said enough good things about it.
All right. What have I been up to, bud? Hold on, I gotta clear my nose.
I did that for you in solidarity.
It's gross. Let's see. What have I watched since the last thing that we watched? It was Willow, right?
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, that was a while.
It's been about a month.
Yeah. Yeah, so I saw Violent Night.
Me too.
Super good. Horrible audience, but very fun.
Me too. I had one of your audiences when I went and saw it. It was awful.
I had another one of those recently. Liar Liar, did a little rewatch. Also holds up. Came out the year after Matilda. You know, they're basically sequels. I saw Aubrey Plaza's Emily the Criminal on
How was that?
Barack Obama's recommendation. Just kidding. It was good. I'm surprised that it was on the Barack Obama's end of the year thing. Like I feel like it's getting a lot of hype, and Aubrey Plaza's great. Like I'll watch her and whatever. I enjoyed it, but it didn't like blow me away. We watched This Place Rules, the Andrew Callahan documentary.
Yeah.
And we finally watched Glass Onion. We were putting it off because we had tickets to see it at the New Beverly, and we got sick, and we were like, oh, I don't know if we're gonna make it. We weren't able to make it, so we finally watched it on New Year's Eve. So fucking good.
I liked the first one better, but I enjoyed this quite a lot. Like I still think I liked Knives Out a little better.
Yeah, I think what's cool is that there's a debate to be had there. Like, yeah. I think a lot of people like Glass Onion more for perfectly valid reasons. I might even be one of them, but it's not an open and shut case where it's like,
it's not.
Jurassic Park is better than Lost World. No argument.
They were both good, and they were like different genre of the mystery. Like this one is a more closer to a Agatha Christie whodunit because they're all there, where the original one was he came after the fact and was more of a detective, and it still had the whodunit, like we're interviewing each person, but it was it was different how the mystery unfolded, which I appreciated.
I was about to talk about details, but I think it's too early for that.
Yeah, I agree.
So what else? We've been watching a lot of Buffy. We finished our Curb Your Enthusiasm rewatch.
Nice.
We watched the first episode of WW Evil. Have you heard about that on Peacock?
No.
So it's like a 6 episode. I don't know if they're doing multiple seasons or not. But it's a series that examines like the heels of the of WWE throughout the years. So they do like a whole episode on 1 or 2 people. So this first one was on Hulk Hogan and his heel turn to Hollywood Hogan.
Right.
And that was super cool.
Interesting.
I was never a huge wrestling fan, but I paid attention to it a little bit when I was younger. Like probably right before he became Hollywood Hogan. I remember like Razor Ramon and Bam Bam Bigelow and Mankind and some of these guys.
I was never a big wrestling fan, but there's certain people like Hulk Hogan,
right?
That you
they like transcended.
Bret Hart.
Yeah.
There are people like that. Shawn Michaels. Yeah. The Undertaker.
Yeah.
Well,
I think those are all the same class of guys. I think those are the ones that really broke.
And then a little bit, because I remember they started doing the wrestling video games. Like I had one on
that's what
PlayStation.
Kept me involved.
And so they had like Sting and Stone Cold Steve Austin. I mean, everybody our age was doing the dick suck gesture. Yeah.
But anyway, so that show was really good. I just watched the Hulk Hogan episode. It's fantastic. And then they're doing they do like the Undertaker and Kane and the Stephanie McMahon and Ric Flair. So
Ric Flair.
Yeah, so we're gonna watch some more of those. That seems cool.
Cool.
Saw Megan the other day.
Heard that was fun.
Yeah, really, really enjoyed it. And I finally watched Bullet Train the other night also.
Oh, I loved Bullet Train.
I really enjoyed it. I saw a lot of people like writing it off, and I was like, it's fun. What else do you want?
So I went to an early screening for that, not like a super early one, but like one that was like a week before it came out, for like AMC investors. and I really enjoyed it. And I was like, and I thought it looked fun. Like I was gonna see it regardless, but I happened to be out for a business trip, and I got an email, and they're like, "Do you want to go watch this tonight?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'll go watch it tonight." And it happened to be one of the 7 cities playing it was like they were doing it in Seattle, and I was in Seattle for work.
That's awesome.
I'm like, "Yeah, I'll go see it." And I really enjoyed it. And then like when I got back from that trip and it came out, I took Katrina to see it, and I've watched it. I have it on Blu-ray. I've watched it already as well, so that's on my list too. So no, it's a fun movie.
Yeah, I'm going to revisit it. I had a good time with it.
I had a great time with it.
It felt like it had a good balance of action and comedy and a little bit of heart at the end, you know?
And character work. Like so many people were in that movie for like minutes, but you got like a whole vibe from all these characters. Like Bad Bunny is in the movie for maybe 3 minutes total, but he had a whole arc.
Yeah,
he had a whole arc.
Yeah,
Zazie Beetz was in it for same thing for like a minute and a half.
Yeah.
And then, like, you know, there's another actor playing her, obviously, because she's in disguise for most of the movie as, like, I don't want to spoil it, but she's in disguise for this movie. So she's really only in the movie for, like, a minute and a half. But same thing, she still gets a full arc somehow. It's amazing what they did in the period of time they had.
Yeah, and it feels like everything, you know, coalesces at the end, and, you know, there's a theme to it, and it's cool.
Yeah.
Maybe this is a spoiler, so if you don't want to hear a spoiler, jump forward 15 seconds. I don't know his name, but the dude that played Scorpion, why is it the same character?
Yeah. Yeah, it's basically the same.
Why is he Scorpion again? His family gets killed and there's fire.
Yeah, I agree. I had the same note, and I was like, this wasn't much of a stretch for him.
Yeah. I like that guy a lot. I'm still down.
Yeah, no, he's good.
But I thought that was funny.
So, you good or you got more?
That's it.
All right, I'm going to go through. So, you know, obviously we had the holidays, so I watched a lot of Christmas movies, so I'm just going to shotgun these real quick. But both Home Alone movies, The Santa Claus, a new movie that came out this year with Neil Patrick Harris. It was okay. It was called 8-Bit Christmas, and it's about
Couldn't finish it.
Yeah, it was only fine. Okay, Love Actually, Christmas Story, the sequel.
Well, you really got into it.
Well, Katrina, we had, fortunately I work for a French company, and so we got a lot of time off for the holidays. Mm-hmm. So we had like 3 4-day weekends like in a row. That's essentially. Awesome. So, Christmas Story, Christmas, Die Hard, Elf, and then before Katrina got COVID, we were able to see a couple. We saw Babylon.
Oh, word.
It was all right.
I have no like interest in seeing it. I'm sure it's great.
It's worth watching. I enjoyed it. It's just 3 minutes shorter than Avatar 2. But it didn't feel. It was 3 hours and 9 minutes.
The Navis are in it too.
Yeah, it did not feel like it was 3 hours long. Like it went by pretty quick. I enjoyed it, but it was very much like trying to like suck its own dick.
Yeah,
it was very up its own ass. Saw Avatar too. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was way better than the first one.
I also have no interest in seeing that movie.
You should see it.
I know. The only interest that I haven't seen it is because it's a big James Cameron movie, and I know it. If you see it, it has to be on a big screen.
It has a lot more heart than the first. So I personally fucking hate Sam Worthington. Like I hate him, and because I don't see his face, because this version, like he's the Na'vi guy the whole time. He doesn't bother me as much, but like the characters they introduce, like the kid characters, like actually, that's not just adding kids for the sake of kids. They're part of the story, and there's actually some like heart to it.
Na'vi, more like Na'vi.
I highly recommend it. Like I really enjoyed it.
I'll see it. We'll talk about it.
We rewatched Loki because Ant-Man 3 comes out next month.
Yeah,
and
I want to rewatch
part of it. So I told Katrina that she needed to watch this. She hasn't watched most of the Marvel. She didn't watch Falcon and Winter Soldier. She didn't watch Hawkeye. She didn't watch Loki. So I told her she had to watch Loki for Ant-Man.
Did she like Loki?
So she liked it a lot.
Yeah, I was gonna say I feel like that's up her alley.
Yeah, no, she really liked it. We watched Woodstock '99 on Netflix. It's pretty good.
Yeah. Sad.
I watched The Batman again, and I watched it I think I mentioned it on the last episode, but I watched it again. So Katrina was sick, and I had these trips, so I couldn't get sick. So I had a lot of time by myself, even in the house. And then I also had a work trip, so I traveled, and I was on a plane, so I had a lot of time to watch things. So I watched The Batman again, Violent Night. I also really, really liked it. It's not a good movie, but it's very fun and entertaining, and there's just something about it. We started rewatching the Mission Impossible movies, so we got through the first 4 this weekend. Yeah, I think that's it.
I'm going to rewatch.
We finished White Lotus. We were last time we chatted, we were an episode behind and the episode aired, so we finished White Lotus as well.
I want to rewatch all the Mission Impossible movies.
Snake Eyes. I watched Snake Eyes on your recommendation after doing
And
Eraser. I really liked it.
It's so
really
good.
It's super good.
Yeah. De Palma, dude.
Yeah, I've owned that movie on Blu. I have a 2-pack that has Snake Eyes and Face Off, and I've had it on Blu-ray for like 10 years, and I've never got around to watching Snake Eyes. But no, it was good. Everything that you said, it was the exact plot of Eraser, but with more character development. It was good.
Hot take. Snake Eyes is a much better movie than Face Off.
Oh, it is a better movie. That's true. Well, it was funny. We watched Mission Impossible 2, and Katrina's like, "Why is this so different?" And it's like because they they got John Woo to do it, and they had to rush through so the script wasn't done, but like they wanted to get John Woo right after Face Off, and Tom Cruise really wanted to work with him. So that movie, Mission Impossible 2, was rushed to get it done so they could work with him. But yeah,
it's a movie.
I agree with you. Yeah, it's definitely a movie that happened. All right, 2022.
And De Palma directed the first Mission Impossible.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. Connections.
It's a solid movie still holds up. I like the newer ones, like from 3 on are my favorite ones. Like I worked at the movie theater when 3 came out, and I watched it every break and lunch when that movie was out. So I loved 3, and 4, 5, and 6. I saw both of those, all 3 of those in theaters multiple times. Oh, yeah. So I'm a big fan of the series.
They're good flicks.
Yep. 2022, Roald Dahl, the musical, Matilda. Or Roald Dahl, Matilda the musical, whatever it's called. Summarize it, baby.
Yeah, man. So it's the same story, but they added singing and took out all of the character work.
Yeah, there's
summarized.
It's odd because like in this version, the dad ripped off like the mob or the mafia instead of just ripping off Trenchbull and the FBI.
Their whole story is so far in the background too.
Yeah, it just never comes
The 96
up,
one,
really.
It feels like a two-hander, what's going on with the parents and the police and stuff. And in this one, it's just like, oh, yeah, the parents are doing something bad, whatever.
Yeah, and this one's weird. Like, it's I'm just going to say it at the front. I was really looking forward to this because that video that I sent you with the kids dancing in the hall, and it's like, we got to be a little bit naughty. We got to revolt against the adults. And I'm like, yeah. And, like, it's so fast, and the dance moves are insane. Like,
yeah,
I was expecting
it's impressive.
That,
it's an impressive clip.
And that was the whole, like, that was like the entirety of the advertising for this movie was that. And that to me seemed like a middle of the movie, like, let's go, like, team up against the adults kind of thing. That's the ending song, like, that the movie ends on. I felt robbed.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't impressed with, like, any of the musical numbers in this movie.
Nothing memorable.
Nothing. Like, and, like, none of the other ones really had any big dance numbers. Like, there was obviously some. But, like, when that is the entirety of the trailer and all your Instagram advertisements and all your TikTok advertisements and all your Facebook advertisements and all the like, mostly even the print stuff, I saw, like, one billboard or something for it. And if you, based off the advertising, you would think the little blonde girl in the beret is Matilda.
Yeah, exactly. She's going to play some integral role. Nope.
She plays no major role in it at all.
Yeah.
And so I kind of felt cheated by this movie.
Yeah, it was kind of a slog, man. I fast forwarded through some of the songs in the second half.
It felt like this. So this movie was under 2 hours.
Right. I opened it up and I was like, oh, it's 2 hours? I'm not excited about this anymore.
Well, even in that, I was like, oh, whatever. Like I think I'm into musicals more than you, and I hated musicals until Greatest Showman, and then for whatever reason, something clicked in my brain, and I went back and rewatched a bunch of musicals, and I have much more of appreciation. So, like, I went into this one thinking, I'm gonna like this more than Alex. Like, I figured I was gonna like it more than you.
Sure.
And like, it was a chore.
Yeah.
I even like in certain things like the hair, his hair turns green, and I was just like, okay.
Yeah.
And like the parents were worse in this movie. Like,
yeah, the actors didn't seem like they were having a ton of fun. I really missed that the Danny DeVito and Rio Perlman were like, their characters were in love in the first one.
Yeah.
There was no balance to it.
No.
They're just awful
like in
people.
This version,
and Matilda was kind of a pill too.
Yeah, she wasn't like, you don't necessarily need to be super sweet and everything, but like the dad, like, understand me, he's like, oh, he not understandably, it's his fault. In this version, they purposely didn't send her to school. In the original version, they thought she was 4 and they liked her being at home. So it's just kind of like, they're idiots. They forgot to send her to school, and they were also selfish. In this version, they purposely didn't send her to school, and then they got a fine for not sending her. And then he's like, you're punished for us getting a fine. And she's like, well, fuck you, Dad. I'm going to go mess with your hair. And it's the first of 3 versions of you got to be a little bit naughty in this. And it's just like, okay. And there was like this weird sub-story, like side story where she has a relationship with the librarian, but the library is a mobile library, like in like a big old RV.
Yeah, I didn't care for that.
And she's like telling a story.
Didn't like the story.
An escapist and a acrobat who fall in love
at the circus
and have a baby at the circus, and the evil stepsister / sister-in-law forces the mom to perform even while she's pregnant, and when it causes complications and the mom dies during childbirth.
It's a really dark story.
It is. And the librarian says, this is a really dark, fucked up story. Like, why are you telling me this as a 6-year-old?
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, it's just a story I'm making up. It's not real. But then it turns out to be Mrs. Honey's story. Exactly. And it's just like, I don't understand, like maybe in the musical version, because there's musical numbers that are cut and there's certain things that are cut in the movie that are on the stage version. And it's like maybe something got cut, but like why the fuck would Matilda know Miss Honey's story? And she said, oh, it's just a story. It's just so odd. And then at the end of the movie, she says like, oh, it's your story. I thought it was just a story I made up, but this is like your exact story. And like, I don't feel that was earned at all.
No, it was weird and it doesn't pay off. And it adds at least 20 minutes to the movie, and I don't have any attachment to it. I don't have any reaction to it, except that, Matilda, except the woman dying. Like Matilda describes in detail that this acrobat was pregnant and forced to do this death-defying trick, and spoilers. And she, falls from the trapeze or whatever, and breaks every bone in her body, but she still manages to deliver the kid and then dies immediately afterward. And it's like, why is that in this children's movie? And this movie feels like it's marketed, not marketed. This movie feels like it's made for a younger audience than the original one. It doesn't have that Tim Burton 4-quadrant thing going on. It feels like this is made for children, and it's kind of darker, even though the original one has a suicide in it.
Yeah. Well, and like the original one was funny. I didn't say this when we were talking about the original one, but one of the things that I thought was funny, because Matilda's a genius in both versions. Like in the original movie, she does like a math problem. It's like 13 times 437 or something like that. In this version, she does like this like crazy calculus problem. Whatever, it's fine. But like
it's not as charming.
No, like she doesn't get the powers until way later in the movie, and it doesn't have that scene. Like she gets the powers and she like tilts the glass. Like the first time she realizes she has the powers, it's just like the first movie when the newt is in the water and she tilts the glass and everything. But in this version, she immediately is like, I have powers. Let me show Miss Honey. And she immediately, like, it takes her a little bit of time, but she like moves a can or something for Miss Honey. In the original version, she isn't able to do it immediately. She has to practice. But you get that wonderful scene with the poker chips that you brought up, where she's like practicing and she's like
having some joy because she's a child,
throwing the moving everything around the room, and she gets better and better. In this version, she never, like, the powers never come easy, which I guess is a little bit more realistic. But yeah, she's never a child with him. Like she never has fun with him, and like it's.
Well, speaking of her not being a child, the original movie, I'm not going to get the times right on this, but it spends a lot of time with putting the audience with Matilda and like endearing us to her. And it's easy with Mara Wilson because she's cute, she's charismatic, and this little girl is like, she's a cute kid or whatever. Yeah, but like there's nothing about her that is like, oh my gosh, this little girl, she's so sweet. And the movie doesn't do her any favors because it just cuts within the first like 5 minutes. We're being told that the parents are bad parents, even though we haven't seen it. And Matilda's like, sometimes you got to get back at them. And it's like, okay, well, maybe your dad has a point. Maybe you are kind of a little pain in the ass because you're just immediately fucking with his hair. In the original one, we see the parents being shitty to her. And we even get that moment where the dad says, I forget what the exact quote is, but the dad gives her the idea that a person should get some comeuppance if they're bad.
Yeah, he says, when you're bad, you need to be punished.
Right, when a person is bad.
Yeah.
And they make a whole point. The narrator's like, he said a person, not a child. And it gives Matilda the idea that she can get back at people. And that sets up what she does for the whole movie. Yeah. And in this version, she's just like, I'm Matilda, and I know that you need to be mean to grown-ups sometimes.
I mean, I'll disagree with that because the whole opening thing was every parent in the hospital being like, "Oh, my child is the best and it's so beautiful," and the doctor's like, "This is the most perfect baby I ever delivered," and the mom is like, "I'm not pregnant. I'm not having a baby. I'm not having I don't want it." And
I
then,
know, but it doesn't have the same
to,
effect.
Yeah, and then the dad's like, "Oh, it's not a son. It doesn't matter," and he calls her boy throughout the whole movie.
Yeah, which is kind of weird too.
Yeah, and then at the end, the man's like, "Oh, you want to adopt my daughter?" And he's like, "You called me a daughter." Like, it was weird because at the end, I felt like I said, the ending of the original movie was perfect because they were terrible to her the whole time, and then they recognized the best thing is for them to go. This movie, it almost seemed like they weren't going to do it because they're like, "You want to take my daughter? You want to raise my daughter?"
Right.
And everything. And Matilda goes, "You called me daughter?" And it's like, wait a second, are you going to
go back
for a second? And this one, it doesn't, they fill out paperwork in the original movie. In this one, it's just like, I will take care of her and pay for everything.
Yeah.
But this isn't a legal arrangement. So it's almost like leaving it open, but maybe the parents can come back.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just it's kind of, it's not as neat and tidy and and satisfying.
It's not.
So
even
go ahead.
Go ahead.
The dad is misgendering her throughout the movie, which is it's kind of weird. It's kind of a weird choice, but not a huge deal. But the movie also does this weird thing with making Cruncham Hall, the school, feel like a concentration camp. The original movie kind of does that, but this one really leans into it. There's straight up World War II and 1984 Big Brother imagery, deliberately done in this movie.
The slogan is "Children are maggots," but in Latin.
Yeah.
That's the school's slogan.
Yeah, and when they go into the school, it has it's got a gate with the words on the top that feels very very concentration campy to me.
I agree.
And there's the inside of the school is just gray and brutalist, and I guess I probably should have taken better notes, but it feels like there's very specific references to both World War II and...
You're absolutely right, because they say this isn't a school, it's a prison, and then there's a point, I glazed over because this movie was so long and slow and a chore, but there's a point where, let me see if I wrote something down for it.
While you're looking at that, there's even a moment in Trunchbull's office where you see the window behind her, and it is Star Wars Empire logo. It's circles in a very specific orientation.
But there's a point where I don't remember why they were doing it, but Miss Trenchbull had the entire student body doing some sort of physical labor in the mud.
Yeah.
And they were wearing these onesie kind of prison thing. It looked like the clothes that when you look at Auschwitz photos, just the outfits that they had them wearing, the prison uniform thing, they basically were in that kind of uniform doing physical labor in the mud. I think your observation's straight on. This was a weird prison concentration camp.
At the end, they even pull down a statue, the same imagery that you see of Saddam Hussein's statue being pulled down.
Yeah, it was
or also Confederate statues being pulled down. And there's a reaction shot. The statue comes down of Lashana Lynch, who's Miss Honey, who's a black woman, looking at this statue being pulled down. And then there's also a weird racial implication of Trunchbull. Trunchbull is, the step aunt of Miss Honey in both movies. But in this movie, Trunchbull is a white woman and Miss Honey is a black woman. And this movie also has this very specific thing where Trunchbull has kept receipts of taking care of Miss Honey, every expense that she's had raising her from 6 to 18 or whatever. And she's making Miss Honey work off this bill for the rest of her life or whatever at Cruncham Hall. She's either garnishing her wages or taking all of her money and allowing her to live in the cottage or whatever. And there's this weird racial implication of a white woman keeping a black woman as an indentured servant.
Yeah, it was a little weird. And certain things about this movie, even though it's a musical and by nature of it being a musical, it can't be more realistic. But it almost seemed like they tried to keep this more subdued and grounded in reality.
Mm-hmm.
And everything, she struggles the whole movie with her powers. She does the whole scrunching the face and putting her fingers to her temple kind of thing, and really trying to do the telekinesis thing.
It feels a lot closer to Firestarter or Carrie.
Yeah, and it absolutely does. And they try to keep it a little bit more grounded in the way the physics, when she throws the kid around, it's not as her flying thousands of feet like it is in the 90s version. But then there's also weird stuff with she stretches that Asian boy's ears, and then there's another part where the kid who has to eat the cake burps like she for whatever reason she just thinks Matilda stole this piece of cake.
Yeah.
And then like the little fat kid burps, and then it travels visually across, and then Trunchbull smells like that burp smells like chocolate. It's him. So there's like these weird moments that like for a movie that tries to be a little bit more realistic and like heavy, then it does these like 2 or 3 random things like the ear stretching and the visible burp that just like are completely outside of the rest of the quote unquote realism of this movie.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. Exactly. This is a movie where you visually see a burp float across a room, and then a woman like licks the particles out of the air to taste what the burp is, and then also they have fascist imagery, like directly fascist imagery. It's not a metaphor.
And what's weird about this is there's something to be said where I think like this movie being more serious, like this is a more serious movie,
sure,
than the original one,
yeah.
But also like. Emma Thompson, I love Emma Thompson. I think she's an incredible actress and can do almost any role you give her. But like this Trunchbull wasn't scary. Like she was a little off-putting. But like Trunchbull in the original movie is this big, imposing, scary. And you mentioned like the camera work they did to make her even more big and imposing. Mm-hmm. But they also had this like her jumping off of like second stories of landing and the whole house shaking.
Right.
Like. And, part of that is, like, you're looking at this from the point of view of a child like Matilda. Mm-hmm. And even though she's a genius, she's still a child. So it makes some of these things a little bit more imposing and fantastical. Like, realistically, when she threw the girl with pigtails, she probably didn't fly hundreds and hundreds of feet. But that's what a little kid is seeing.
Right.
And I get from the first movie that even though she's a genius, you can get a little bit of, like, unreliable narrator because it's a child. But this version, it's just, like... Trunchbull wasn't as scary. Like she looked like Emma Thompson in prosthetics, where like Trunchbull in the original movie was scary. And I've seen women who kind of look like her. Obviously, there's an exaggeration, but like she was more terrifying in the original movie.
Yeah, and you reminded me of another thing that I thought was really interesting. You're talking about these fantastical things happening from the point of view of a child, and sort of giving us an excuse for the fantasy, right? Or an excuse to suspend our belief. But there's a whole dance number when Bruce Bogwater is eating the cake, where they're like cheering him on, which sidebar, that scene also doesn't work for me because the kids like cheer him on right from the beginning. I prefer in the 96 one where Matilda like makes a thing out of it and there's some suspense whether or not he's going to finish it. And he needs their encouragement to do it, as opposed to this one where he's just into it from the beginning. But there's this whole dance number where the kids are like cheering him on, and he's about to finish it, and then we cut back to reality, and Miss Honey is like yelling like, "Go Bruce!" But it's just her. All the kids are sitting there terrified, and you realize, oh, this whole dance number has happened from the perspective of Miss Honey, and that felt super weird. Like, why is this woman having to daydream? The kids should be having the daydreams.
Or like that's the problem. Like with musicals, either say every musical number is a vision or a hallucination or just a fantasy, or don't, because later on it seems like the musical number is like it's just like this movie was having its cake and eating it too, and just like not committing to what
Bruce.
It is.
Yeah.
Like decide what it's going to be, and like people understand like musicals are not in real life. Like they're surreal places where people burst into the songs. Like
but then you can't break the fourth wall in the middle and say this is actually happening in this character's head. We don't know if the other ones are.
Yeah, it's a little weird. I don't really.
I did a little Google to see how this movie was being taken, in reviews and stuff too, and it's got like 92% on Rotten Tomatoes and I think 75% audience score. I was surprised that nobody's talking about any of these things.
No, well, and like,
I don't feel like we're reaching at all.
No, and there's other things that were like interesting that like didn't pay off, and they kind of like the little Asian kid throughout the movie is like, I think I can move things with my minds, and throughout the movie you see him like trying to move things and it can't, and at the end of the movie he's doing it, and then you see it can move, but it's just like built into the playground. They had like a can built into a pulley as a trick, and it's like, why would you add that to a playground? Like, you add this feature specifically for this one kid just to like torment him? Like, what is that? And
the school also becomes a circus for some reason.
Yeah, there's like a full-on carnival, and there's like a giraffe, and they're feeding it. Like, that's super. Like, there's these windows that are like 3 stories up, and they're feeding a giraffe like with a completely open window. Like, you can't do that.
This isn't a learning environment.
No, it's just like, was that real at the end? Like, where did all that money come? Because it becomes from Crunch'em Hall, it becomes big friendly school. But it's like, where did all this money come from to like build a carnival there that apparently seems to be there now?
Right, because in this version, Miss Honey doesn't get a bunch of money, right?
No, they end up at the house. Like, she gets her house still.
Yeah, but in the original movie makes a point of saying that she came into a bunch of money. This one doesn't.
No, this one, it just seems like she got her house back. Yeah. The original movie, it's clearly there's a family fortune and that big-ass house. And
she also just, like, takes over the school from Trunchbull. She says, "This is my school now." I literally laughed out loud because it's such a ridiculous line.
It was weird. And, like, now, granted, I've never read Matilda, so I don't know what the book is like. Because, like, in this version, there are other teachers throughout the movie. Like, they don't have, like, any lines or anything, but they're just, like, intimidated. And then at the end of the movie, they're almost like Grandpa Joe from Willy Wonka, where they're just, like, all of a sudden they're all lively and they're on the roller coaster and the Ferris wheel and they're all in all that stuff. It's just like,
that was another thing about this movie. Like, if we're in a fairy tale, then that's fine. I don't need to think about what the other parents and teachers are doing, sending their kids to the school or teaching the kids at the school. And Miss Honey has an excuse because she's working under, coercion or whatever. Duress, thank you. But in this movie, they're making a point of showing the other parents and showing the other teachers. And now I'm thinking about them. I'm like, what kind of people are allowing this to happen? You guys see this? I want to know what their excuses are.
And, like, the kids that are just like, oh, the parents will never believe us. Like, if you literally every day come home and say you were put in a chokey.
Yeah.
Well, that's the other thing that's weird about this. Like, this was the one thing I kind of liked. And then immediately was, like, undercut. Where they're like, if we just stand up to her, they can't put us all in the chokey. So there's a scene that's not in the original one where, like, they're doing, like, a spelling bee or something. And all the kids are doing great. And then one kid misspells a word. And they're like, to the chokey. And then all the kids just stand up and start misspelling
Spartacus.
words. But, like, yeah, but it's not like they were assigned a word. It's just like one kid stands up and he's like, cat, C-A-S. And another kid's like, net, N-E-P.
Why wouldn't they say K-A-T, by the way?
Yeah, whatever. Like, whatever you need to be. It's fine. But then they're like, you can't put us all in the chokey. And then she's like, yes, I can. And she just, like, in that classroom has, like, 100 chokeys. Like, when the fuck does a principal have time to build these? And then, like, it didn't pay off.
She set up, like, a Saw torture room.
Yeah, it was super
Yeah, right.
weird.
Chekhov's chokey. She didn't put anybody in there.
And then it, like, just, like, immediately goes to the next scene. Like, it didn't actually matter. So
yeah, it felt like that was, like, a huge studio note. They were like, oh, we need to do something to one-up the last movie. Even though that, like, is not a thing. That's not the goal of this movie.
No, it's just, I don't know. And this, like, had a big, like, this won all kinds of awards in the West End and whatnot. And it was like,
apparently the musical's different than the movie.
Yeah, there's different musical numbers. There's other subplots that got cut. Because, I mean, when you go to a theater, they're typically longer. It's probably like a 3-hour play versus, a 2-hour movie. But I'm pretty much done with it.
Yeah, this is a bummer. I want to watch a fun movie next time. Yeah, I want to watch 2 fun movies.
Yeah, I thought this was going to be... I was really excited about this. I thought this looked incredible.
Yeah.
And there wasn't a single musical number that was... Except for the closing one. Like, that closing number was fucking rad. And I feel like they should have, like... They probably would have got a little bit more goodwill from it if they did, like, what The Greatest Showman did, where they opened and closed with The Greatest Show.
Mm-hmm.
And just, like, he's passing the baton to Zac Efron at the end. But, like, I feel like if they started with something strong like this, like, people would have been, like, a little bit more on board. But, like...
Well, apparently people are on board. You and I are the only one talking about this.
That seems odd.
Yeah. This is Netflix dropping the ball again.
Yeah.
Did you see that? Man. Well, just really quick about Netflix. Did you see that $18.99 got canceled?
I did.
I think that Netflix has exhausted goodwill of people who want to watch shows on there. So why would you get invested in the first season of a show on Netflix if you know that they're just going to cancel it?
Well, and that's the thing is, it's weird. There's all these campaigns for certain shows. Like when Sandman came out, they said like it was like the biggest show at the time, but like Netflix is like, yeah, but that doesn't mean it's going to get it. So like there was fan campaigns of people going through, and I had friends on Facebook who were like, we need to make sure that Sandman gets a season 2. Watch it. So like I have friends who watched Sandman like 3 times in the first month because they want to make sure. And there was even campaigns of like, just turn on Sandman, turn off the little notification that says, are you still here? And just play it so we can get it.
It's so stupid that it's come to that.
And Netflix has made statements like, we don't make re-up things unless we've seen that a lot of people have watched them. But then all people are saying, like every time Netflix posts something on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, everyone's like, don't cancel these things right away, because the problem Netflix is putting themselves in a place where they're saying they're forcing their fans or to binge shows versus being able to watch. And the whole point of streaming is I can watch something whenever I want.
Right. And
So,
it's going to backfire for them now because people are not going to invest in these shows.
well, that's what's happening is people aren't watching the shows because they don't want to get like Santa Clarita Diet got 3 seasons, but it still ended on a cliffhanger, and it's like we don't know how that goes. But Netflix is the worst in terms of canceling things after 1 season.
Yeah.
But it's like maybe they need to do it like see how it goes after 3 months. Like give it a quarter.
Right. And I mean, that's even not enough, honestly, but something.
Yeah.
And I have to assume that on the other side of the business, people are less likely to work with them. You know, from a writer, director, filmmaker perspective, you spend years crafting something, and you go to multiple outlets. You go to HBO and Hulu and Disney or whatever. You go to all these places, and you finally settle on the location that has the team that you believe in, that you think gets your vision and is going to push your show. And then you spend 2 more years writing it, filming it, pouring over all these tiny little decisions and blah, blah, blah. And then promoting, going out on this tour and talking about it, getting excited for the next season and dreaming up what it could be and shit. And then they just cancel it. And HBO Max did this shit too. When you cancel things that people have spent years of their life working on, they're not going to trust you anymore, and they're not going to want to bring their ideas to you. And you're going to get worse content.
The 2 guys who directed
Batgirl.
Batgirl, they said they would work with them again because like how are you going to turn down an opportunity to work for a major studio? But they're like we would put it on the contract going forward that this movie has to come out or we're not going to work with them. That's insane.
Yeah.
Well, no, like Christopher Nolan is potentially not working with Warner. I don't think he is. I think Oppenheimer's not under Warner
I think
Brothers.
you're right, yeah.
So, like, he said after they were releasing things directly in theater, he's like, I'm not going to work with them anymore.
Yeah.
A lot of the actors were upset.
Directly to streaming, you mean?
Yeah, directly to streaming,
Right.
yeah. Day and date.
Yeah, they fucked him on Tenet.
Yeah, and then...
I know it was a hard time, but...
Yeah, well, and the other one that got fucked was Godzilla versus Kong.
Mm-hmm.
Warner Brothers was the distributor. They didn't make it. It wasn't Lionsgate. It was Legendary Pictures made it, but Warner Brothers distributed. Legendary has said they're making another movie in the Kong Godzilla universe, and they are now not working with Warner Brothers. They ended it because Warner Brothers made the decision to distribute it and do day and date, and that movie did decent in theaters. Like it made a few $100 million in theaters, but nowhere near as much as
height of the pandemic.
Yeah, nowhere near as much as it would have made if it didn't go. And then you look at, it's just insane. Yeah, streaming needs to figure it out. I think streaming's going to be a bit of a bubble.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what ends up happening. And I mean, Disney Plus has their own issues too. I'm not worried about them not committing to Marvel or shows like that, but they're doing the opposite. They're like oversaturating. Yeah,
well, and the issue that I'm kind of upset about as a big cinema guy, like you and I go to the movies pretty much every week. Or close to. Yeah. And one of the things that really kind of pissed me off during this year, and I'm big in AMC and like I support that company, and they were talking about how Q3 was going to be a rough quarter because the studios weren't putting out anything. Like they delayed so many movies during the pandemic, and they're still delaying movies for whatever reasons for like putting them in different times. But like there was no movie really worth seeing from August really until November. There was like a good 3 months where there wasn't like that, you have to go see it. And that's why movies like Smile were able to like dominate, but still they were only making $15 million. Like that's not a big opening. So it's just kind of like weird that we have this like weird bubble in streaming, and streaming isn't necessarily doing as well, but studios are still not putting out quality movies throughout the year. Yeah. It's even, I was talking to a friend at work, and there's a lot of good movies coming out this year, but like January, like this month, other than like Megan looks fun, but there's nothing really big coming out this month. February has a few big movies like Ant-Man and a couple other, but like at this point, the studios have recognized the day and date isn't successful. Like HBO didn't get gangbuster numbers. Why are they not putting movies in theaters? Yeah. It's disappointing. Yeah, and I think there's a writer's strike potentially coming up too, so. Wouldn't surprise me. Yeah. It's going to make things harder. Yep. All right. Thanks for tuning in to the industry show. Yep. That's give us your plugs, bud. Yeah, I'm on Instagram at thisalexic, DYS Alex IC. You can follow along with the movies I'm watching on Letterboxd at Pulisci, Pulisci. I'm also on Twitter at Pulisci, but I'm not using it right now because
It's just a whole big
It's a
pile.
whole thing.
It's a whole bowl of wrong. And I'm on TikTok occasionally at Polishi as well. And I have a cool Etsy store. If you like TV and movie and elder emo type of t-shirts, you can get stuff there. It's called Burn the Scene Boutique. And if you use the code Remake Rewind, you get a little discount.
Yeah, that's in the description. And you guys can check out everything that's MDXpods related at MDXpods.com, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, all at MDXpods. We're also on YouTube. Check us out there. If you want to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/MDXpods.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
Thanks.